Picture this. As the last year of the previous millennium rolled along, a television screen was tuned in after school to a brand new program, centered around a fantasy world where children traveled alongside fantastical creatures of all shapes and sizes, proving their bonds by engaging in combat alongside each other and traveling the world to discover what other adventures could be had. Alongside the rest of the world, this series captured the admiration and imagination of a little 6-year-old girl in upstate New York. In that show, I had my first hero, Ash Ketchum. Hello everybody, I'm Kate Cass, and welcome to another edition of Let's Talk About. Today, let's talk about Ash Ketchum. For reasons you probably already know, the Pokemon anime, and Ash in particular, has been on my mind a lot lately. So whenever I'm thinking about something non-stop, the only way to appease that is to naturally make a video about it. So today, I want to take a look back on Ash's journey in the Pokemon anime, how it changed, how our feelings changed about him, and how we got to where we are now. There were few things I wanted more in elementary school than to be like Ash, to explore the world, to have a lovable group of monsters who would do anything for me and I'd do anything for them, to be part of a ragtag group figuring things out together through hard work and camaraderie, and maybe even save the world every once in a while. The Pokemon anime was what propelled Pokemon to become my definitive childhood franchise, and the franchise I love the most to this day. I was a Pokemon fan before I was a fan of Sonic the Hedgehog, Lilo and Stitch, The Lion King, and even Digimon. Long before many of the series I hold near and dear to my heart today, there was Pokemon. It was my introduction to gaming, to anime, and to mass consumerism. That all started with following the journeys of this scruffy, wannabe Pokemon master who always believed he could be the very best despite the odds and poor type advantages.
I first got into the Pokemon anime when I was about 6 years old. I remember it seemed like all at once, all the other kids in my first grade class started talking about Pokemon during recess one day. I was just a little kid, so it took me a while to find the right channel to watch it on. But once I did, I was hooked.
I got into the anime pretty early, when it first started becoming popular in the West, and every time that Pokemon was on, I would always be watching it almost ritualistically. And this is not even a joke. Every day I came home from school, it was 4 o'clock, Dragon Ball Z and Pokemon in Channel 4, and never did I miss that no matter what. It was a daily occurrence.
I started to get into the Pokemon anime not long after it started airing in the US. Around that time, I was 6 to 7 years old when I got into the show.
I believe I started watching from the very beginning, so when I was around 7 or 8, on Saturday mornings, or the dual block they used to have, with the first half hour being Pokemon and the second half, of course, being Yu-Gi-Oh!
What card would you play? You have to think quickly in these situations, Ash.
That's what I would play.
Oh, I see.
I first got into the anime when I was like about, 5-6 years. It was probably like the first Japanese animation I ever saw. I'm from South America, so I just grew around this type of surrounding. And I remember some of the first times watching Pokemon, I was like, I like it and I feel fascinated by it. Pokemania came here like rather lately, I think around 2003-4. It started like dying down. It came a bit later than in, for example, the US, which was from the moment the show came on.
I'll admit, when I first saw Ash, I wasn't the biggest fan. I was more of Misty's fan, and I wanted her to really take the spotlight. But of course I knew Ash and Pikachu were the ones who were going to take over the series, and eventually I started to begin to like him.
And I can tell you, I wanted to be just like him. Traveling the region, catching every Pokemon the eye can see, gaining gym badges, having my own adventures.
It really felt extremely special, knowing that no matter how terrible school is, I know that I can at the very least hang out with Ash and the gang along with Pikachu and see what crazy shenanigans they get into.
In the beginning, Ash was something of a unique protagonist in the world of anime, or even as the hero in a fantasy series. At least back then. Personality-wise, there are a lot of child heroes out there like Ash. Determined, friendly, spunky, and always hungry. Walking up to any obstacle with a boundless amount of confidence and enthusiasm, believing that's all they'll need to come out victorious. And usually, that is all they needed. Think of how many times Yugi pulled just the right card he needed just through belief, or how the Digidestined were able to will their Digimon to be at their strongest when they really needed it. But what made Ash different is that while he had those miraculous moments, he lost. A lot. Ash's time in the Pokemon anime, especially in his early days, actively fought against the idea that just pushing through with everything you've got will be enough to overcome adversity. If you want to succeed in a world where everyone has the same advantages of monster companions that you do, you gotta work for it. And that's a lesson that I don't think we appreciate enough from a show like this. We all joke about how Ash is not a great Pokemon trainer, but a detail that's important to acknowledge is that when he made a bad choice, he paid for it. He suffered the consequences by losing a battle or the respect of one of his Pokemon that he had to earn back by proving himself. Maybe not in the most conventional tournament legal ways, but still, that's what he did. Failing to do so cost him a victory in his first Pokemon League. I know a lot of fans are still kind of peeved about that, but when you really think about it, that's a really sobering moment. After all Ash has been through to get there, he still has more to learn. And he did learn.
My favorite moment that's about Ash specifically is when he loses to Richie in the first Indigo League. That was really impactful, and I don't think any other shows I'd watched before that had a character legitimately lose a competition that had been built up like that. In all the other shows I had watched up to that point in my life, if a character lost a competition, it was because they were going to have a very special episode all about being a good sport and a gracious loser. But the Pokemon League had been built up literally through the entire first season. And then Ash lost. And we did have an episode where he had to learn to be a good sport to Richie, but even after that, he still moped around for a while. That was a plot point. And I think it was one of the most authentic depictions of losing something you had your heart set on that I'd ever seen. And that was very important for me to learn at that age.
Ash may have boundless enthusiasm and unearned confidence, but that also means he's eager to have as much experience as possible. The Pokemon world is a big one and only gets bigger with every generation, and he wants to see all of it. That's a really appealing trait to portray to kids. As Suede observed in his old Pokemon Journey videos, in one of my favorite quotes that come from that analysis, Ash and the audience learn that failure is not the end of the journey. That's an incredibly important message to put out into the world. You shouldn't be afraid to fail, because that's the only way you learn. And while it may have made him the laughingstock of children's anime, Ash is the embodiment of that.
It was fascinating watching Ash trying, because at that moment a lot of characters try and succeed, and they fail in the middle of the episode, and then they succeed. Ash was one of the first characters that I remember failing, and that didn't stop him. He was just like, I gotta do this. And it was really inspiring.
It was inspiring, seeing how he takes, how he stumbles and all the losses that he takes, and still manages to push himself at every turn.
Despite his shortcomings, Ash ranked in the top 16 in the Indigo League. By the end of the Johto League, he made it to the top 8, able to defeat his longtime rival in a battle for the very first time, and only losing because his opponent was simply better. He gave it his all in a much more admirable showing than in Kanto, but it just wasn't enough. Same with Hoenn, faced a lot of tough challenges, rose to most of them, and simply lost by a hair. Or rather, a cat. These losses were always more satisfying to me because they were appropriately tough opponents. Ash tried his best, but still has a ways to go.
I noticed a lot of change in Ash as well. It's weird for me to say, but as I was changing personally, Ash changed a lot as well. Watching Ash not only be much more assertive and also a lot more strong and brave than I remember, it kind of made me feel like a lot of what he said he was going to be doing in the original series ended up paying off in the last few years. So if he was able to grow up, I kind of felt like I needed to do the same as well.
Then came Sinnoh. As much as I wasn't completely invested in the Diamond and Pearl era when it was airing, mainly because of how much longer it was compared to other generations, and my somewhat bleh reaction towards the Sinnoh region in general, it was definitely Ash's best showcase as a trainer at the time. This was easily his strongest team, and still ranks high among the teams he's had since. This time, he managed to make it all the way to the top 4 in this league. Why didn't he go higher? Well, once again, he was humbled by a tougher trainer. Not his long-standing rival for this season, he already beat him in an insanely cathartic battle. Not any of the other trainers he'd been acquainted with, of which there were many in this league. No, he was beaten by this rando. This is Tobias. He had a Darkrai and a Latios. And that's why Ash lost the Sinnoh League.
Boo! Oh, boo!
In hindsight, that was clue number 1. Look, the Tobias thing was bad and dumb, and I can't believe he was allowed to compete with those Pokemon in the first place, but if it was a self-isolated incident, it might have been a blemish on the series and nothing more. Instead, looking back, it felt like it was a turning point. Because then came Black and White. Since we're talking about Ash's growth here, I think it's important to mention before we go any further that we weren't sure if Ash was aging all this time. It seemed like it. He was growing a bit as a character, his dress sense got a bit sharper, and he was becoming a more accomplished battler, albeit slowly. There are a couple of mentions of at least 1 year passing and stuff like the Pichu Brothers short, but how much time had passed in the anime was just speculation and assumptions. Until we took our first look into Ash preparing to venture to the Unova region, when we're hit with this.
10-year-old Ash Ketchum.
Strict confirmation that in 660 episodes, Ash Ketchum was still 10 years old. I know that at this point, Ash entering each new region was supposed to wipe the slate clean and start again, and that was okay. It was a compromise that let them bring in new characters while still having something familiar to the audience. That's all fine and good. But between this and the now notorious first battle Ash had in the Unova region, where Pikachu lost to Trip Snivy in its very first battle, which might go down in history as the most infamous battle in the entire franchise, I think they cleaned Ash's slate a little too well. Before this point, Ash was perhaps a bit low in his skill level compared to where he should be for a kid who ate, slept, and breathed Pokemon, but the progress he did make felt relatively gradual. This was even reflected in the company he kept during his travels. In the early days, Misty and Brock were gym leaders. They were more skilled trainers than him, so he learned from them. But once we got to the advanced generation in Diamond and Pearl, he became something of a mentor to May and Dawn, who were just starting their journeys.
I don't know what it was, figuring out that Ash and the gang was still around and that they had a new gang of characters following them. It was something about that really made me want to go ahead and see what all the buzz was about. Something about this new cast of characters really drew me in.
Ash still had progress to make, but it felt like he was growing. But as time went on, to keep the cyclical nature of the show rotating, they had to keep regressing Ash to make him more relatable to the kids at home, who might be starting with this particular season of the anime, and to create conflict. With every decision made in the direction the Black and White anime took in that first episode, Pokemon had officially removed all doubt. This show was going to go on forever, with Ash at the star. He was never going to grow up, and no matter how hard he tried, he was never going to become a Pokemon master. Because if he did, then the show would end, and we can't have that.
I didn't keep up with the anime. Well, I did for a while, actually. But I think that around the Black and White anime, I think that it was the moment I just couldn't do it anymore because Brock, who was one of my favorite characters, left the show. And I think that around 10 to 11 years old, I was like, this is not going anywhere.
I kept up with the anime, including the movies, right up until Diamond and Pearl Generation 4. I dropped off just as Generation 5 was kicking into gear. What I saw of the anime Best Wishes, it didn't captivate me, didn't grab me. They felt the need to have the narrator to kind of like reiterate or remind everybody that Ash was a 10-year-old boy in the first episode of the Black and White anime. When I first heard that, I was not happy. I felt a lot of mixed emotions regarding the character that I had grown up with at that point for almost 12 years.
It's weird recounting it now. Looking back on it, I think I matured a bit when I came to that conclusion. I realized something that you never want to see in something you grew up with, that it's not necessarily gonna grow up with you. This was also 2011, which was the year I turned 18, so I don't know, maybe I was just growing up and seeing through the corporate cogs of the Pokemon franchise. At perhaps the worst possible time. Heck, I was still salty that the writers wouldn't let him become a Frontier brain when he got the offer after winning the Battle Frontier. And that was in 2007. Oh yeah, and you beat a legendary to get that final medal. Congratulations, Tobias, you're not special. For the record, I still watch the black and white anime. Episode to episode, I loved it. I really liked Iris and Silent as companions, especially Silent. We here at KCast Reviews appreciate Silent, and it had some truly epic story arcs, even if none of them were the one from the game. The changes to Jesse and James may be controversial, and I get that, but the schemes Team Rocket pulled off in Unova were flipping awesome. Most of the problems I have with Black and White can honestly be traced back to Ash. That loss against Trip Snivy is really just the tip of the iceberg. You all know the boneheaded moves he pulled in gym battles and even trainer battles in these 3 seasons. Do I even need to tell you?
I mostly have had a lot of admiration for Ash and everything that he's accomplished. And I love all of the adventures that he's been a part of. Well, all of them, actually. But Black and White going forward soured my feelings regarding Ash as a character. My feelings only got worse from there when I saw that his personality had changed completely from how he was in Sinnoh League Victors. They had reset Ash's character, and his trainer experience had regressed back to that of a rookie trainer, which was not cool in my book after his best performance in a league tournament.
Well, at least he got redemption by beating that Snivy as a superior. The league isn't even worth mentioning here. It's so lame and feels like an afterthought in the grand scheme of things. They tried to course correct this a bit in the X and Y seasons, but by then the damage had been done. The XY anime did bring in a lot of new fans, and with how strong Ash's team was, they were sure this would finally be his time, but for old-timers like me, we all knew it was coming. The fact that he lost the Kalos League was less of a shock and more of a resigned acceptance that this is how things were gonna go. It didn't matter if he finished in second, all fans saw was the loss. In fact, I didn't even see the loss. I didn't watch Kalos up to the league. I stopped caring. Though I did enjoy what I've seen of XY, and I hear the Team Flare arc is really good, so I do intend to catch up on it sometime.
I was there when he lost to Alon. I will never forget this amazing moment where everyone unanimously thought, he's finally gonna do it, he's finally gonna become the Pokemon Master, and he loses in what I can only describe as a riding ass pull. It was completely ridiculous, and I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people stopped watching the anime altogether because of that.
Where before Ash's struggles to learn from his own shortcomings and propensity for failure were a refreshing character flaw, now had become an insidious inevitability. A sure sign that the show was not willing to let Ash grow or improve anymore because they didn't think they could. It's like he had the opposite of plot armor. Ash can't win the big battles, no matter how prepared he is, because once he does, there's less of an excuse for him to travel to the next region and for him and Pikachu to plug the next game.
Because I always thought that, at least from my perspective, that as I felt that as time passed on and I was growing up and learning, Ash was growing up and learning beside me. Sadly, it turns out that wasn't the case. I'm not particularly proud of the way that I kind of vented my displeasure at this, but to this day, those feelings still remain the same. I'm not very happy with how they handled Ash's character for Black and White. I know why they did it, but I feel like it could have been handled way, way better than it was. I came back momentarily for the Generation 6, Pokemon XY up to XY and Z, but I never fully got back on the anime train.
I didn't really get into the Pokemon anime again until I was in college, and they put the original Indigo League up on Netflix. Going back and watching it, I realized it was not the super serious, serialized show my child self thought it was. It was a straight-up comedy, and an absolutely hilarious one at that. It was just much more serious and serialized than anything my 6-year-old self had ever seen at that point.
Pokemon kind of just, it always had the reset button that every moment something happened, okay, we gotta reset it up. It started getting tiresome.
Despite promising myself I never would, I stopped checking in on the show when Sun and Moon came along. I tried a couple episodes, I couldn't get past the art style, I know I'm missing out on some great stories, I'll give it another try someday, but for the sake of the story, it's important to know that I wasn't really watching the anime anymore. When it was announced Ash was going to school, the regression just seemed to get worse and worse from my point of view. Who wants to go to school in the Pokemon world? I thought the biggest perk of venturing out into a world filled with wild monsters ready to attack at any moment before you hit puberty was to avoid that nonsense. Then one day, I log onto my social media and see that Pokemon and Ash Ketchum are trending like mad. Why? Ash won the Alola League. He won a league. Ash Ketchum was officially a regional champion. Oh my gosh. I reread that news tons of times to make sure I was understanding properly. It was unreal. I didn't even watch the battles, but I don't think I'd ever been more proud of a fictional character before. I was ecstatic to see Ash get this accomplishment, but at the same time I started thinking about how the show was going to keep going after this. Sword and Shield had been announced by this point, so of course there was going to be new seasons of the anime to go with it. So with Ash finally having a champion title under his belt, the question I think we all had on our mind was,
now what?
The what in this case came in the form of Pokemon Journeys, a series where Ash would not go on the typical gym badge fetch quest with Galar region, but become an assistant to a Pokemon professor and join the Pokemon Coronation series, a competition that if you win, you get to fight the current world champion, Leon. This, I felt, was a good compromise. It kept Ash at the same skill level because he was on a more challenging quest than the typical trainer journey, and he also became a professor's assistant. A direction that made the show accessible, since Ash would go on a lot of journeys and discover new and familiar things that would appeal to old and young fans. He'd still ask a lot of questions, but not look like an idiot. He'd be hyper and outgoing, but that's the kind of energy he'd need for something like this. I've watched quite a bit of Pokemon Journeys, and it's the most I've enjoyed Ash on the show since the early Diamond and Pearl seasons, probably. Honestly, they could keep this formula going for years, but as much as I was enjoying Journeys, there was something off about it. Again, not the show itself, it was really good and fun, but with Ash revisiting all the surrounding regions, going for such a big title, and running into more of his past friends and rivals than he ever had before, not to mention he was assembling an insanely good team of fan-favorite Pokemon, and Dracovish, it was starting to feel like a celebration of the entirety of the anime, which was cool, but also felt like a curtain call? I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was something about this approach that, as much as I was liking it, felt a little disconcerting. The episodes haven't aired here in the States yet, but the news of the World Coronation arc as it was coming out in Japan kept popping up everywhere online, because Ash was in the finals, battling champions, and he kept winning. As far as I remember, he's never defeated a champion before, not even in a casual battle. But here he was, doing it left and right. He beat Steven. He beat Cynthia. Then, on November 11th, 2022, Japan Standard Time, in the 1219th episode of the Pokemon anime, Ash Ketchum defeated Leon and became the world champion. When this news broke, I'm not gonna lie, I thought it was a joke. I thought people were trolling. I thought people were jumping to conclusions like in Kalos. I thought someone had photoshopped an image for some kind of what-if scenario that we all hoped for but thought would never be a reality. I saw this image when I first woke up that day, and when your eyes are still adjusting, it kinda looks like the Alola League trophy, so I thought maybe someone was misinformed and it blew out of proportion. But no, Ash had won. He was now the world champion, the very best Pokemon trainer, like no one ever was. And that was really surreal. I'm someone who gets very attached to fictional characters I like, but even by my standards, I felt this overwhelming sense of pride. I was proud of Ash for finally getting a break from the writers.
I was at a complete loss for words.
I was in shock.
Oh, I was excited. I was really happy for him.
Frankly, I was hyped. Just like everybody else.
It was like finding out your old friend who you haven't seen since elementary school won the gold medal in Olympics. Oh, I know that kid. Good for him.
I'll admit I have not seen the episode yet. I'll admit I was spoiled because it was literally everywhere and I couldn't block it out. I believe it was also like mentioned on like a TV and like a quick passing of the news.
And then I get the news of, hey, Ash Ketchum is now the world champion. And I was like, what? No. He can't. The show is finished. I haven't watched this. The show is not airing in here in any of the channels in Tommy yet. But the show is still going and he's the world champion, dude.
I was already expecting it since watching the shows and all of the callbacks. Considering the concept of the show itself, which is basically like going back to every region that had been traveled to before, I knew that there was a possibility that this was going to be Ash's last adventure, his last chance to win the whole thing.
And it was weird because it's something that has been going for quite a while. And it was something that, who cares? But then it was like, Bastard did it. The guy did it. He's now the world champion. He's the best, like no one ever was.
I was really excited to hear he is the world champion.
I never in a million years thought that this was going to happen. After 25 years, he finally did it. He managed to get his goal accomplished faster than Luffy did getting the One Piece. Which he's still currently doing as we speak, by the way.
To best describe how I felt, I was both happy and relieved at him becoming a champion. Because it's like after all this time, after many, many, many years, over 20 years later since he started his journey, he finally did it. Ash finally did it. Our boy finally did it.
I haven't watched the Masterclass or that now famous battle myself yet. I started this journey with the English cast. I want to see it through with the English cast. But as more screenshots and clips kept being shared, all the power and celebration and emotion conveyed in every single one, as one of the busiest streets in Japan cheered this anime icon on as this battle was streamed live on billboards, it really did feel like an unbelievably monumentous occasion. A marathon that we've been running for over 20 years, and yet I never thought we'd see the finish line. I went into work that day absolutely dumbfounded, with one of my former coworkers greeting me not with a hello, but with a, "Did you hear about Ash?" That was amazing. As the hype died down over Thanksgiving, there was this question that kept nagging me in the back of my head about the whole thing. Like when Ash won the Alola League, I kept wondering, what are they gonna do next? I couldn't imagine another achievement Ash could go for that's greater than this. Is he gonna keep doing the research assistant thing? I suppose he could. There's no reason why he couldn't. The anime was gonna keep going, so they've gotta find something for him to do. Right?
Though the cynic in me also said they are never gonna let him do so, because if they do, then he's gonna have to move on and they won't be able to continue cashing in on the series because, let's be honest, Pokemon, the anime, is such a monumental cash cow that getting rid of Ash would basically be career poison. And yet, they actually did.
On December 16th, 2022, about a month after Ash won the World Coronation Series, the Pokemon Company released this video on their official YouTube channel. In complete defiance of any expectations I think any Pokemon fan had, Ash Ketchum's Pokemon journey would officially be coming to a close, with the upcoming Scarlet and Violet season starring a brand new cast of characters. You may have noticed I was pretty quiet about the news on my social media when it was announced, mainly because of the Christmas season taking up my time, but also because I didn't know how to feel about this. I mean, I should be happy about this, right? One of the most famous videos on my channel, or infamous if you go by certain metrics, was about how Ash was suffering as a character by sticking around this long, dragging the whole show down with him, that he should be allowed to just move on, and so should we. But seeing it actually happen, reaching the end of this long, long journey that I frankly never thought would end, left me with this weird, conflicted feeling.
Well, of course, I was sad. This was someone we've seen for the last 20 some odd years, and we weren't going to see him anymore. Though, of course, for me, I felt like it was also time for him to move on. can't really stay 10 or 12 years old forever either. And especially if he is going to be a Pokemon master or a mentor or a professor or a teacher or however many theories there are out there about what Ash's career is going to be, he does need to leave the series so he can achieve all of that.
When it was announced that Ash would be leaving the anime, I honestly thought it was the right direction for the series to go. I'd seen plenty of video essays and articles saying that Ash needed to leave the series so that the show could grow and progress, and so that he as a character could grow and progress. On top of that, it had been so long since I'd watched the series that on the rare occasions when I did catch new episodes or movies, Ash already felt like a different character than the one I'd grown up with. They'd made major changes to the character design, and the new voice actor sounded completely different to my ears. The Ash I knew was already gone, so why not replace him with a new main character?
Of course I want Ash to be allowed to grow and evolve. He's done more than in the last 3 years than he has in the last 15, and it's been great. But as irrational as it might sound, there was a sort of security with Ash as the protagonist all this time. No matter what else changed in the world of Pokemon, Ash and Pikachu would always be there to explore it. I don't think I really appreciated that until I was told it would be taken away. I guess I took for granted that Ash had always been there before, so he'd always be there for as long as Pokemon was. You know, kind of like how Phantom of the Opera will always be on Broadway. Until it won't be. Man, we were facing a lot of nothing is forever syndrome at the end of 2022, weren't we? The closest thing I can compare it to is watching your kid go off to college. You trust them to be okay. You know they're capable of achieving great things on their own and taking care of themselves. And you know that this is the best thing for them, but at the same time, you don't want to let them out of your sight because he's just always been there.
A part of me is happy because I feel that Ash has sort of overstayed his welcome. Another part of me is sad to see him go because, like I said, he's been around for over 20 years. I've known him that long. I never, even after I grew away from Ash, I still tuned in from time to time to see how he's been doing, how he's been progressing. Hoping that someday he'd achieve his dream of becoming a Pokemon master and win a league. One of those already did happen, which was that he did win the Alola League, but I personally think that he should have won the Kalos League. We were robbed. But again, that's just me.
I'll be very sincere. I kept saying that Ash needed to retire or Ash needed to go or they needed to get rid of him so that the series can become fresh and new and we can get new fans instead of old fans. Things needed to change. That doesn't mean I'm happy about it though. I mean, shit. Now that he is at his final episodes, I feel honestly pretty sad. But in a happy way. 'Cause this guy, growing up, was a lot of things to me. He was a personal hero, and he also helped me realize that no matter how bad everything is, you still have friends who will be there for you no matter how ugly everything gets. And he was true to that. Even when I stopped being there, he was waiting for me no matter what. Whether it was him and Pikachu and any other new cast of characters that they had coming in, joining them, I did not expect him to still be there, waiting for me to come back. So, the fact that he was patient for me meant that I needed to do the same for him. I guess you can say that both of our patience paid off, 'cause I got to stop being alone for a really long period of time where I legitimately felt completely helpless, and he finally got to live out his dream, and now he can finally move on with his life the same way that I can as well. Honestly, I feel like I grew up wanting to be him, but at the same time, I grew up wanting to be what he aspired to become. Happy with what he accomplished instead of what he couldn't.
It's been a bit strange to process all this. How I wasn't jumping for joy when this final arc was announced, because I thought I was so ready for Ash to move on and let someone else take the lead in the anime adventures for once. I still stand by what I said a few years back, that this will be better for the anime going forward. But it turns out that when something, even a fictional animated character, has been a part of your life for almost as long as you can remember, and then you're suddenly told that you'll be going your separate ways, it can be sad. All that said, I am incredibly happy that Ash is being given a big final curtain call of an arc to make the end of his time in the anime an event worthy of the occasion. It's not like what happened with, say, The Fairly Odd Parents, another show starring a presumably immortal 10-year-old that slowly destroyed its reputation until it quietly just stopped with little fanfare because there was no one around to care anymore. That's not the case here. The Pokemon Company know how significant it is, not just for Ash to truly become the Pokemon master he always wanted to be, but for him to move on without us. They know this is a big deal for fans of all ages, and they're gonna treat it that way. But as one journey ends, another begins. If there's anything softening the unexpected blow that is Ash's departure, it's the glimpse we've gotten into what is next for the anime. And I mean glimpse. We know next to nothing about what is coming next.
I actually don't think I've seen anything about the new protagonist yet, so let me look them up. Let's see what Bulbapedia says about them. Okay, there is not much here. There's like one paragraph. It says she has a mysterious pendant. Okay, let's see if Roy's has anything else. Oh wow, it's almost the exact same text.
But there is a bit to go off of. Like the fact that our new heroes appear to be starting their adventure from one of the academies from Scarlet and Violet. Naturally, Pokemon may change in some areas, but it will always have cross-promotion.
I really like these new characters. I know very little about them. I don't even know what the hell their names are in English, or in Japanese for that matter, because there's so little information about them that I'm too lazy to research myself. But based on what I've seen about them so far, I'm really liking the direction that they're going for here. And I love the fact that we're going to be seeing the Paldea region, and even more so, that new Pokemon are going to be in the spotlight instead of Pikachu. I really hope that Sprigatito is going to be one of them, because I love that cat no matter what. I don't really know what they're going to do or how far they'll take it with these new characters, but I do expect to see something different.
I'm happy that we have new faces to see. My only hope for these characters, and maybe the anime as a whole, is that I want them to kind of like capture... I want these characters to have the same sense of wonder to the world around them, like all of us did when playing Pokemon Sword and Shield, when we saw the wild area for the first time, or Legends Arceus, which was breathtaking. I don't have a particular hope for them. If anything, I just want them to kind of like emulate in a way, the people that play these games, that sense of wonderment and excitement when they see the open world of Pokemon. There are many paths to take, many places to discover and explore, and a lot of Pokemon to find. The world is theirs to explore however they see fit, and I can't wait to see where their adventures lead them. Actually, I do have one more thing. I do have one more hope to add. Don't leave us hanging like they did with the GS ball, like they did over 20 years ago. That's it. I hope this time a mysterious Pokeball leads us to something.
He has a mysterious Pokeball. Oh my gosh. Are they bringing the GS ball back finally? That would be hilarious.
I'm not going to spend too much time here speculating on Liko and Roy, what they'll be like, or Liko's possible but not likely parentage.
Also, like a lot of people are theorizing, I strongly believe that the girl is Ash's kid.
But could we just take a second to acknowledge the fact that the new lead of the Pokemon anime is a girl? I cannot tell you how meaningful that is to me. As someone who grew up hearing so many times that I wasn't allowed to like Pokemon because I was a girl, the fact that the new face of one of the most iconic areas of the franchise is that of a female protagonist makes me feel so seen, even when that stigma is far less prominent than it used to be. I also love her design and her friend here, and that it appears she picks Sprigatito for her partner. Best Paldean starter for the win! Whether Liko will become the face face of the anime for as long as Ash did, or just during the Scarlet and Violet seasons, is yet to be seen. But it's both nerve-wracking and exciting to go into a new season of Pokemon with this much uncertainty.
I want to see the growth of them as both trainers and with their Pokemon. I want to see them, be able to achieve their goals, win whatever battles they can, lose while learning a lesson. I want to see them have that growth that Ash got for the last 20 some odd years. To be honest, I'm also hoping Ash may make a cameo in the series in some way. Maybe at a distance, maybe passing by on a TV screen. Maybe he becomes like their mentor if the series is set a bit further in the future. I would like to see that.
In the weeks after this news dropped, and now as Ash's final episodes have started airing in Japan, I realized that I had too many feelings about this. Ones that could only be contained in the best way I know how to, through a YouTube video. This isn't a review or comprehensive retrospective on Ash's time in the Pokemon anime. If it was, it would be the length of a Quentin reviews video on a Nickelodeon sitcom. But I couldn't not talk about this because it's a really big deal, especially if you've been watching the Pokemon anime in some capacity since it started like I have. This is just me looking back on my own history with Ash and how I felt about him over the years, along with testimonies from other fans who I knew grew up with the show or just experienced it in some form.
Ash really was someone who felt like I could relate to, or at least someone I could look up to, as someone that I can aspire to be, because everything that he stood for was everything that I wanted to be when I grew up. Someone who is brave, determined, and despite what we may say about him now, he really did have his heart in the right place. I wanted to be like that. I wanted to be determined, and I wanted to be better than what I already was.
For me, it's been a roller coaster to say the least. In my childhood, I idolized Ash. His free-spirited nature, how he made friends with ease, how he never gave up despite the odds, and of course, how much he loved Pokemon. I was proud of what achievements he made, even when he didn't come out on top or gain them through the most ludicrous of circumstances. As the years went on, I grew frustrated at Ash's failures and attitude, and how I could peek behind the curtain at the show's refusal to let its protagonist grow. Now, as a 29-year-old woman, I felt an immense pride and sadness when I saw that the anime equivalent of Peter Pan was gonna be leaving Neverland. I got so tired of Ash's double-decade-long losing streak and regional resets that I forgot how important he once was to me, until I realized that he still is. It was tougher than I thought to say goodbye and come to terms with the fact that Ash Ketchum would not be part of Pokemon anymore. But to say he'll leave his mark on the series would be a gross understatement.
As for a favorite moment with Ash goes,
boy, there's quite a few.
Let's see, off the top of my head, Ash and Pikachu running away from the Spearows. Just going through the effort, like standing between, protecting Pikachu from the flock of Spearows. It is a classic moment.
I can remember him winning the Pokemon race when he was on Ponyta that evolved into Rapidash midway through a jump. And then winning?
One of those actually came from Pokemon Heroes. I really, really loved when he finally got into the Secret Garden and we got to see him interacting with what he thought was a completely different person, but it turned out to be Latias in disguise as a pretty girl. Seeing Latias acting all cute and adorable around him, seeing him getting to know her and her brother as this wonderful music played out, I really appreciated how Ash took time of his day to not only get to know these people, but also get to show Latias that he did care about her and that he wanted to be her friend.
Ash just being awesome in the Pokemon movies. Just Ash in general in the first movie, punching Mewtwo, coming out of that smoke with like the group of with like an army of Pokemon coming out of the smoke. That's still to me like one of the top cinematic moments of my childhood.
I of course love like the one-liners, especially from the dub, like the fact that when they're on the boat in the first movie, Brock, who is like, I didn't know Vikings were out here. And Ash goes,
they mostly live in Minnesota.
I thought that was hilarious. I still think that's funny.
Everything that Ash does in Pokemon 2000, the whole thing regarding the Chosen One, getting the orbs, riding freaking Lugia.
Another one of my favorite moments also came from my favorite Pokemon movie of all time, Pokemon Ranger and the Temple of the Sea. It was around the end when Ash, May, Pikachu, and Manaphy are stuck in the temple after everything started to flood. Ash decided, I can still fix this, I can still save everybody, but I don't want to leave my friends behind and I don't want any of them to die in the process. So he leaves Pikachu, Manaphy, and Best Girl May behind so that he can go out there and pretty much risk himself doing this. Seeing Ash legitimately just stand up and say, I'm not gonna sit there and let everything go to hell. If I can do something, then I'm gonna do it. And the fact that he actually managed to get out of this while also dying but still coming back to life at the end was probably one of the coolest and most badass things I've ever seen in my life.
Anything cool that Ash does in the Pokemon movies, those are all of my favorite moments. Ash just basically going through the battle frontier, his battles against Brandon being a highlight.
I would have to say all the times he had to say goodbye to one of his Pokemon over the course of the first few seasons were the most impactful to me.
I recall the first time I cried in a TV show was with Pokemon, actually. I think it was Ash leaving Pidgeotto.
Everyone talks about Bye Bye Butterfree, and that definitely is a moment I remember clearly, but for me, the episode where Pidgeotto evolved into Pidgeot was the most impactful to me. I had been waiting for Pidgeotto to evolve forever.
I fucking love birds. I really like birds. They are fun, they are cool, and I just really attached myself to Pidgey. And I grew attached to it, and the moment it evolved, it was like, wow, he's growing, he's becoming better.
And now Ash had a bird big enough that he could ride on it, and Pidgeot took out all these scary Spearow and Fearow so easily. I was getting so pumped for this new powerhouse on Ash's team, and then it's like, oh, Pidgeot has to stay and protect the flock. And I was still young enough that I didn't realize this was their way of writing Pidgeot out of the show, and I legit expected Ash to come back for Pidgeot after the Orange Islands. R.I.P. 8-year-old me.
It was like, no, that's my that's my favorite Pokemon. You can't do that. I feel like at that moment was like my 8-year mind. Whereas everyone has to grow up someday. But that doesn't mean you have to completely leave it. It can be back. It can be in a place that it means a lot to you.
How about Ash versus Paul in the Sinnoh League, where he and Infernape finally prove themselves against Paul, and they managed to get a win. They finally get catharsis.
Of course, in the most recent lore, Ash winning and becoming the first Alolan champion, because that was the series that I finally got back into Pokemon with. I was super excited about that. And then I also remember, of course, I think 2 or 3 parter episodes of in the Johto region, Ash helps this like baby Lugia named Silver.
He pretty much stood and became the big, fearless hero in all of this. Even though he barely knew who these people were, he's only been there for less than a few days, and yet he's already become so involved and so attached that he is willing to risk his own life to make sure that not only do they come out of this okay, but that everyone on the island of Altamar can make it out of there alive as well. It really is incredible that this 10-year-old is braver than a lot of people that you see in typical anime nowadays.
Honestly, I could go on.
And outside of the confines of the anime or even the Pokemon franchise, Ash Ketchum did leave his impression on me in ways that are still a part of me to this day. Yes, Ash is one of the reasons I wear the hat. Whether you rooted for him through his wins or facepalm through his losses, Ash and Pikachu have spent the last 25 years capturing the hearts and minds of the young and young at heart for almost a generation. That's something really special. If you ask me, as much as it hurts, he's more than earned the chance to race off into the sunset with his partner Pikachu, the memories of his friends, followers, and Pokemon right alongside him, as the journey continues. Thanks for watching, everyone. Definitely let me know what your thoughts and feelings are on Ash and his departure in the comments below. That's why the series is called Let's Talk About. A special thank you to Orange Octopi, Sebastian from Cinemageddon Reviews, Soul Despair from Cinemageddon Plays, Haley Longo, and El Ricon del Weirdo for helping me give Ash the epic send-off he deserves. They're all cool people who do cool stuff, and you can find links to a bunch of that cool stuff in the description. And as always, I want to give a very special thank you to my patrons who help support my content. including Chelsea A. Crandall, David L. Sproul, Hawk Hero, Jinx Productions, and Wait in the Wings. If you'd like to join these fine people in supporting my content while getting cool exclusive perks, you can check out my Patreon page at the link in the description, as well as my other social media if you'd like to check out any of those. Thank you so much again for watching, and I will catch you all next time.